So, everyone, please welcome, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order here. Adriana Campbell. Adriana Campbell is a tech recruiter at Facebook. She graduated from the Year Up Bay Area program, 2012. She spent time doing outreach for the Year Up program. She was part of the alumni community. She spent several years on the alumni board, and 2 of those years served as the board president. She was also born and raised here in the Bay Area. She spent that last 8 years of her career making her mark in the tech industry. Adriana says, quote, "Europe allowed me to flourish into the proud Afro-Latina that I am today, regardless of the impact, big or small, paying it forward, setting a positive example, and providing what she puts her mind to as possible, gives her the faith that anyone can achieve greatness." So give it up for Adriana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Secondly, we have Edeline Bobe. Edeline is currently the head of operations at Miraxa. She is the founder and co-director of Tech Activist. She served as the global social justice lead at ThoughtWorks. She was a founding partner and former community manager at Black Girl Code. She is a Mills alum, graduate of 2013 School of Loki MBA graduate. And Edeline has been a human rights advocate for 22 years, focused on creating programs for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. She brings a social justice framework to every project and team she has been a part of. She is a creative, curious, humble, and analytical-minded leader with a bias towards action and impact. Edeline is from the section of North Philly called the Badlands. She transplanted to the Bay Area to go to college and break into the tech industry. I encourage folks to listen to the SoundCloud interview that was about 4 years ago to really get an idea of who Edeline is and what she's all about. It was an extremely good interview. Big ups to Edeline. Next, we have Tiffany Lorraine Schumacher. Tiffany is the CEO of Hack the Hood. She's also the founder of Chief. It's a private network focused on connecting and supporting women leaders. She was the senior director at university programs at AI for All. She was the West Coast regional director at Black Girls Code. She was the founding campus director at Roots International Middle School. Tiffany is also an MBA candidate at the University of Berkeley House School of Business. So big ups, Tiffany. We got more information. She has a decade of experience in social profit management, scaling quality education programs, and building high performance teams for youth serving organizations. Tiffany defines herself as an educator committed to leveraging technology and businesses to drive access for communities of color. Tiffany is a proud Newark, New Jersey native and lives in Oakland. Outside of work, Tiffany enjoys yoga, Lake Merritt barbecues, and is an art museum and graffiti enthusiast. So big ups. And last, but definitely not least, we have Tina Lee, founder and former CEO of Mother Coders, a nonprofit that women with kids gain skills, knowledge, and connections they need to jumpstart their careers in tech. She currently works at Bitwise. She was the head of partnership success at Anita B. Org, director of Bay Area Outreach and Innovation for the California State Controller's Office, director of Innovation and Learning at Zero Divide. She too was also a Mills undergrad alum in political, legal, and economic analysis, as well as a Mills graduate MBA alum from the Loki School of Business, as well as a Stanford graduate alum with an MS in Education, Learning, Design, and Technology. Tina is a recognized leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and was among the first to promote accessible childcare as an essential ingredient for building inclusive processes. Tina is a native San Franciscan. She was raised by her grandmother and was the first generation of her family to go to college. One of Tina's most memorable moments was being invited to the White House by the Obama administration to talk about building our nation's future tech workforces. So thank you all. This is an extremely dynamic group we have here, and I'm really honored to moderate this panel. So before we jump into the subjects, I want to take a moment here for both Tina and Edeline. I know both of you are pretty much aware of what's going on with Mills. I wanted to give you both, a really brief moment to reflect on, what Mills means to you and how some of these changes, what do you feel about the changes, real briefly?
I guess I'll go first.
Go for it.
I'm sad, like everyone else, really sad about the financial pressures and what's happening just across higher ed at large, right? Every school has been impacted by COVID, and things were already starting to go sideways even before that. And you have to remember that Mills was started at a time when women weren't allowed to go to college. And our founding principles were around educating women at that time when there was no place else. And it was the rich families who were able to send their daughters there. So fast forward, 200, almost, 200 something years now, and everything's changed. The value propositions changed, society has changed, society and women have changed, although many things have not, like sexism, right? So although I'm super sad, I'm very optimistic about what we're going to be able to create, because we get to start over and we get to include way more people than we did when Mills was first founded. So I am sad, but optimistic and embracing the change.
Thank you.
And just to raise up, Mills, when we're talking about the digital divide, was the first women's college to offer an undergraduate degree in STEM. And when you're thinking about the Bay Area, I know when I went to school at Mills, when you're thinking about the Bay Area, all of the tech companies, all of the huge college campuses like Stanford and Berkeley, not enough people. When you're thinking about like women in tech, we're really pulling and engaging with like Mills. So many organizations didn't even know that Mills College, we were right there. We represent, like 50% women of color, low income, being first generation. We're breaking so many obstacles. And I just think, how unfortunate that Silicon Valley didn't really tap into Mills College, being that we have this rich history that we were, the first women's college to offer an undergrad in STEM.
Yeah. Thank you both for that. And I appreciate you telling your stories and raising Mills up. So let's go ahead and jump into the topic of our panel discussion. So we're talking about the digital divide, some of the challenges working with that, and just the complexity of this particular issue. And one of the things that, the current pandemic really raised to the surface is just how complex it is. Everything from, the remote work for, people who could even remote work, remote schooling, and the challenges around, accessibility for kids, whether, the internet service was at home or even if they had a computer at home, issues around even the vaccine rollout. So, the apps to actually schedule your vaccine. And I heard on the radio people talking about helping seniors navigate that process by doing it for them. So all of these different issues, of tech inequity began to really shine in very tangible ways for folks. So I wanted to ask each of you, like, what does the digital divide represent to you? What's your perspective from your perch and your purview? What is it?
I would like to just jump and I want everyone else to jump in as well. So this quick fact, there's 4.66 billion active internet users in the entire world. 4.6 billion. That's a lot. Of this number, 4.32 billion people, so 92%, close to 93% of active users access the internet via mobile devices. When you're thinking just of that, because you were like, oh, wow, there's so many active internet users, but when you think of how do they really engage with the internet, and you find out that they're actually using the internet from their mobile device, you already know there's a class issue of consumers and people who are producing. And you already know that that number of people who are consuming is a lot. 92.6% of people online, it's designed for you to consume. So that right there tells you what you need to know about the digital divide. Talking about privilege, when you're talking about who then are the creators, you have to, recognize digital colonization, how most of the internet things that's online are in English, but English is only 5% of the world's first population, first language. But it makes up of 90% of the content you find on the web is in English. So right there, I'll just drop that just so we can kind of expand when we're thinking about the digital divide. What does that actually mean and how it was set up and designed to work?
Yeah, thank you so much for those statistics. I think starting off with data is really important. And it also emphasizes the divide. Like I think about the digital divide, and it's about the haves and the have-nots, right? Who is going to have access to school, to work, who is really going to have access in general. And so this is something that when I think about it, it's beyond, just like you just mentioned, it's beyond just having access to the internet. But what does that mean for their future, and how does it highlight the inequities? And I think that's something really important to ground ourselves in.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can chime in, I was speaking to a friend of mine, and he put it in his perspective of the pandemic. It was never a secret before, but the pandemic put a big spotlight on, if you can't go into work and you don't have internet, then you don't benefit from the situation at all. You have no plan B, no plan C. You just have to ride the wave until, everything goes back to normal, or some sort of normal in the end of this. Another perspective I was thinking of is someone who is a young teen, and they're in school and they have no sense of a plan B or a plan C for themselves now to further on their education. Whether you're talking about someone who's in high school or in college, and maybe they don't have the funds or the means to now have to go buy a tablet or a computer or something like that in order to further their education. Someone like for myself, I was blessed to be able to work from home, but that wasn't the case for a lot of people. So if you don't have those opportunities, then you just had to, like I said, ride the wave. And I felt like that just was, it's obviously it's not fair. It's not fair at all, because now you have to figure out, what's the next hustle? What's the next situation that's going to come back for me? So yeah.
Yeah. Tina.
So this is a really complicated problem. When we're talking about the digital divide, we're talking about the economic divide, economic opportunity divide, income divide, racial divide, gender divide, right? All the political engagement divide. So when I first started in 2007, working at Zero Divide, it was a community technology foundation that was specifically existing to bridge it. And back then it meant computers. So they're like, okay, let's build computer centers. Let's, give everyone a computer so they have one at home. And then they realized people didn't know what to do with it. So then it became content. Like, how do we teach people how to use the computer? And then it became, oh wait, now you need broadband. So broadband access became a thing, right? And then fast forward to now, all those things still apply, except it's way more complicated, because now if you're doing at home distance learning, you need parents who can help you, or some other caregiver who can help you with it. So the digital divide just became something else. And then you hear about kids who have distance learning and had Chromebooks given to them from the school, but then they didn't have high-speed internet, so now they're in a parking lot at McDonald's, you know? So it's a really complex issue, but it definitely intersects with race and class and gender and location, geography. There's some places that just don't have good broadband access. So it's very complicated, and like Adeline said, you know, if you go outside of the US, then it becomes more of a mobile situation. So it just depends on where you stand.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to address this question to Adeline. During some of the interviews that I listened to, you mentioned, you know, recognizing that this is just far more complex than the device and internet access. But you had mentioned, you know, once you got that computer and you were able to get online, it really kind of changed your perspective and your ability to get out there and be creative and function, you know, in this digital space. And then you kind of took that and you expanded it into a project into India. Can you tell me a little bit more about, you know, traversing that metaphorical train track and what that experience was like, you know, from not having, you know, what I refer to as the two turntables and a microphone, first and foundational tools to be creative. And then, you know, all of a sudden you have these tools, what opened up, and just tell me about that experience, that feeling, and, you know, what it did for you.
So I would say, just to give context to people who may not know the situation in North Philadelphia when it comes to the public, you know, public education. I went to a high school that had a dropout rate, 75% dropout rate. I remember freshman year, they just sat us in a auditorium, and they, you know, a leader said, look to your left, look to your right. Next year, one of you won't be here. It's not the language and the conversations you should be having with young people. So when we're saying not, like, you know, you don't have the foundation, you don't have resources, you don't have the support, you don't have so much. And what the internet did for me when I was 18, I had my first laptop. It allowed me to reach out of that non-existing support system, and for me to share my story and say, like, hey, I'm first generation. I don't know what a number line is. I don't know what any of the words, like why they happen. I don't know so much. I speak Spanglish. My English is so jacked up. I don't know so many things. And I know I can get it, but no one's helping me get it. And to have random people online say, oh, here's this, study this, and here's this tutorial, study this tutorial, and share information that was never filtered down to people like me in my community, that completely changed. Like, I remember my brain just hurting. I'm like, whoa, I feel it like moving and growing. And from freshman year, not knowing what a number line was, to then graduating with, you know, the highest honors as a person of color, receiving the Frederick Douglass Award in applied statistics, like that was just like, wow. That was phenomenal. And then what I had to fight was this narrative that, oh, Edeline is such a hard worker. If kids just became and had that initiative and, you know, wanted to be hard workers, they too can have access to information and education that will completely shift and change their trajectory of their life and who they can become. And it's just like, that's so false. Just because I got lucky and people helped me, that's not a good setup. That's not a good design. So I would say going through that, it made me realize, wow, there's so many people without resources. These are all the resources out there. I thought I was just, you know, I just didn't think I was that smart. And it was like, oh, I'm actually very competent once someone explains something to me, I can get it. You know, my first class in Mills College, my first computer science class, I had the second highest grade. I never took computer science. But again, it's just like giving people the access, teaching them how to learn, and really giving them great educational like tools. They can figure it out. But again, on this mobile device, a lot of our kids now, they're doing virtual learning through a mobile phone. They're supposed to do like homework, math assignments, math tests on a mobile phone. And it's just so unfortunate.
Yeah.
But there's so many learned lessons that I learned along my way that made me very empathetic to what people are going through, and to know that there's such an abundance of so many things that that we just have to shift the conversation and know that there's an abundance of things and we are claiming it in. It's our human right to like have access to all this, and we want no excuses. Like our children, regardless where you are born, they deserve access to all this high quality education.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a good segue to a question I have for you, Tiffany. There are a lot of different programs out there that are teaching, you know, underserved communities how to leverage the tech that's available to us, how to leverage these resources, Hack the Hood, Mother Coders, AI for All, Black Girls Code, Hidden Genius Project, you know, and the list goes on. A lot of them are focused on teaching and supporting these communities. In your opinion, what's working? So what I mean by that, where are you seeing the greatest impacts and outcomes? And then what's not working? Like, what is that missing piece that really gives solidity to, you know, being able to break into the industry and have more influence over, you know, our digital and technical society?
Appreciate that question around what's working, because you're right. There are so many tech education organizations here in the Bay, but also nationally. And we're all committed to the same vision and doing the work. But I think that's also part of the reason around what isn't working, right? The fact that these organizations need to continue to pop up, because we're not seeing a shift at the job level. We're not seeing more, even though we're serving all of, I think what is working is that we're introducing young people of color to technology. We're helping them see themselves as technologists, as creators, and we're helping them really encourage this intersectional identity where they can bring their full selves to technology and see themselves as using technology as a tool to impact their communities. But what I'll say that isn't working is there's still an emphasis on preparing students. And there's not an emphasis on how do we make sure that once they are prepared, that they're entering a workspace that is welcoming them, that is going to include them, that cares about them and wants to retain them. And I think that's the other side of the funnel that we're trying to figure out. Well, is that actually our job as tech education organizations? Should we actually be pushing companies and saying, hey, your numbers have not changed in the past 5 years. Here's a pathway. And I know we're doing that, but I wonder, and this is something that we're thinking about now, is it time to build our own table, right? We have so many creative, and we've been talking about these numbers and, oh, in the past 10 years, it's only grown 0.5%. Let's fight and break in, like even the language we use, let's break into this area. But at the end of the day, tech is a tool. And we need that tool to really build for the sustainability of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities. So I'm wondering, how do we really look at what we're doing and saying, okay, it's been successful. We're introducing a large number of students to this space, right? They're already creative, they're excited to be here. But on the not working side, how do we start building them up as their own leaders? How do we really start building them up as the people who are going to take charge in their own communities and letting them know Google doesn't have to be the end game, right? The end game here is your home. Like the end game is how do you really create for your community, for your people. So I think that's something that we can shift a bit more. I think seeing apprenticeships and opportunities to work in different tech companies as experiential learning opportunities, but not necessarily the end game.
Thank you for that. Tina, I read a statistic that Mother Coders, as of 2018, Mother Coders had helped nearly 200 moms advance their careers and raise their salaries about 64% on average. Based on what Tiffany was mentioning about that access into industry, would you agree, or are you seeing anything different as it related to moms who, you know, as a group are faced with just the variables are staggering in terms of just, you know, whether it's racial discrimination, sexism, and then being a mom and trying to balance life with children and family and whatnot. Like, are you seeing that same dynamic play out within people going through Mother Coders?
100%. If you think, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, okay. If you think about, you know, what women face already, and I don't want to enumerate all of that, it's all come out, right? And then you add the caregiver role. And there's just a canon of research about maternal bias and the motherhood penalty and the fatherhood bonus, which is infuriating. So when a woman becomes a mom, she's seen as less competent and less committed to her career. For fathers, opposite. Oh, wow, now they have a family to take care of. He deserves more money. He deserves more promotions. We should support him more, right? And you think about all those dynamics, and then you layer on all the intractable things that are happening in tech, and it's just mind-blowing. Yet the industry has invested so much money into programs to help girls develop these skills, to help college students finish out and enter the workforce, and then suddenly they become moms and they're no longer wanted, right? So that's a structural problem that's based in bias and the narratives that we tell ourselves about who belongs in tech. And it's so ironic because there are so many moms that are already in tech, they're just being super low key about it, because the moment they make that a thing, meaning put a picture on their desk or culture, we have this bias against caregivers. It's so strong that it affects women who have not become moms yet. It also affects men because they also carry that bias, right? So it's just one of those things where, you know, how do you eat an elephant? Just start somewhere, anywhere, because it's in the air. It's in the air.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of surfacing up to the job market and thinking about, you know, the impacts of the more social impacts of digital divide. Adriana, as a tech recruiter, how are you navigating bringing people into, you know, these tech industries? Not pointing out Facebook specifically, but just bringing folks into these industries and recognizing that, you know, the company has a culture, and there are these key terms used like culture fit or, you know, other dog whistle type terms. Mm-hmm. That may, you know, either detract people from one applying, or if they do apply, helping them navigate, you know, what they might be getting into. How do you navigate that process?
Right. Just a quick clarification. I'm actually the coordinator who supports technical recruiters.
Okay.
So technically, in a sense, I am given a profile, and within that profile, I'm given specific people that they want them to meet with, and they decide, those hiring managers or the people who are going to be on their team directly will be connecting with them and saying, okay, based off the conversation that we had in this specific area, this is how we feel about this person. I can say that what they try to avoid is, simple things like not providing, if they're a man or a woman, not providing the information of what their national or ethnic background is. It's specifically focusing on them and their skills, their career backgrounds, what they've done in the past, things in that nature. So by the time that we get this information, the interviewers that they're going to be meeting with are very familiar with that aspect and that aspect alone to determine, is this going to be the person who can not only just do the job that's in the hand, but bring value to the main mission of maybe the team that they're going to be on? Are they going to bring, are they going to be able to take them to the next level and be able to hit their goals, whatever their mark goals are for the year or for the quarter or for the month, things in that situation. So in my experience for myself, it's always kind of been, am I good enough for this role? Am I bringing something to the table that's going to make a difference, that someone's going to say, you know what, we need her? Not just the fact of, well, she's replaceable or this person's replaceable. Not just to say like, oh, they're a diamond in the rough, but just to say like, are we providing a big enough pool to be able to bring these individuals in so that not only do they stay for a time being, but they stay forever, that they feel like they can be comfortable here in this environment? What are we providing? Do we have enough for them to be able to say, I want to be here, just as much for them to say, I want to be here as well? Does that kind of answer? Yeah,
it does. Are you seeing tangible results as that process plays out? Are you seeing tangible results and outcomes that lend itself to a more diverse, leaderships within companies or within the workforce?
Yes and no. As a Europe alum, you see it happening. For instance, Facebook, we can go that part. They have Europe students and interns in their company. So when they start the program, they come in and they're starting right off automatically in the workforce career aspect. So yes, I'm seeing them bring in and holding more of a diverse environment, which is great. Like there's so many different groups that you could be a part of, whether you're mixed or Latina or African American or part of the Asian group. So yes, I do see that, but I think to the part that's not happening is not a lot of people are staying. They're taking a lot more contract roles than they are full-time roles. Even for myself, I've been a contract employee for probably like 3 years now. So they're coming in, but I think just as many people are leaving out, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to pivot for a second and come back to you, Adriana. Tell us more about Europe. How does that program work? What attracted you to them?
Yeah. So it's a lot different now. There's a lot more opportunities now, which is great. I started the program back in 2011. And at the time, it sounded too good to be true. It was like, oh, there's this program that's providing college credits, and then they're going to give you this internship. And back when I was like 18, 19, I was like, an internship? I'm not smart enough for an internship. Like, I just graduated high school and I'm thinking about college, and Europe provides 6 months of a curriculum, learning development stage, like something simple as just, speaking in front of groups, giving presentations, being able to survive in the atmosphere of, an office space. And then the next 6 months, if you make it that far, because they have rigorous rules, you have to be on time, you have to dress professional, you have to be respectable, you have to take this very seriously. So let's say you get on to the next phase and you are then partnered with an internship, depending on whatever learning and development you did really great at the time. And at that time, there was only two options, which was IT, or you could do like something like cybersecurity. For me specifically, IT was very interesting, help desk was very interesting, but I was more of like a project manager kind of background. And so they didn't really know where to put me at the time. So I did end up at LinkedIn, technically holding the title as a data analyst. And unfortunately, I did not, get converted or anything like that. But there were quite a few people who, looked like me who did, and are technically still working at the same companies, and are really, really prospering in their roles. So once you graduate from the program, which is a year, the next phase is either you're going to continue on in the workforce or maybe even go back to school. There was a couple people from my class when we graduated in 2012 who decided to go back to school, and a lot of them became entrepreneurs and doing their, adding their flavor to, the tech world in their own way. So yeah, it's been a great experience ever since.
Nice.
Experience ever since.
Tiffany, tell us more about Hack the Hood. Like, your resume is long, and you've been through a number of these programs. What attracted you to them in particular?
I was attracted to Hack the Hood because it's truly an organization that's looking to serve students and youth who are not being reached. So our application process is literally your name and a commitment to attend. And so thinking about other organizations that are doing this great work, that was something that I was really attracted to. I knew that we were getting at students who were not being reached. I knew that students were being supported throughout the process. And so that's something that really attracted me to the org. Historically, since 2013, Hack the Hood has introduced students to technology through web design. And we've had this incredible model where there's a double bottom line at the end of it, where students learn about web development and then go on to build websites for local entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so that piece and that model is powerful. And so we're actually deepening that and taking it to the next step and really thinking about how do we ensure that students are walking away with, yes, web design skills, but also the foundations of data literacy. I think if we're thinking about technology and thinking about the future, it's really important that we start thinking in numbers, being able to really assess something and make an argument based on numbers. So we say at Hack the Hood right now, we're trying to build computational thinkers. We're trying to really think through how do we make sure when they walk away from us, they are prepared for that next step. And whether that next step is an internship, like you just mentioned, Adriana, whether it is community college, whether it is a four-year college, they are walking away with the baseline skill set. They're walking away with an interest in technology as well as a peer community and the social capital that's needed for it. A big part of our program and a big part of other tech education programs, but for us, we really think about mentorship, right? So every student who comes to us, who goes to the second level, will also have a mentor that is in the space, a mentor that can really support them and guide them through their career pathways. But our ultimate goal and our outcomes is that we want to see students in jobs. We want to see students as entrepreneurs. We want to see students in their communities. So going back to the web design, it was about building a website for a business in your community. Now it's going to be about looking at data so that you can make decisions in your community. How does this impact your community? And while doing that, you're learning this skill set that is future-proof, right? That will really take you to the next level. One of the things that we're also thinking about is where are students coming from, right? And is the science education, the math for them right now? And if not, because I think we know some of the answers to that for some of the school districts, how do we serve as a partner with high school teachers and sharing our curriculum? How do we ensure that when students do come to us, that we're still meeting them where they are and letting them know and encouraging them that just because this is where you are, we're here with you, right? Once you're Hack the Hood, you're Hack the Hood family for life. And so that's how we're growing. I'm really excited. We have an incredible team on board. Our students, we're getting ready for the summer programs, but this is long work. This is the long game, right? Like this isn't a 3-year strategic plan and poof, everything is solved. Like this is gonna take investment and hard work. It's gonna take community organizing and grassroots organizing and partnerships. I'm really excited to be on the call with all of you. I hope we can exchange emails because this is how it starts. We have to really create this network and wrap it around our communities. I'm just gonna go back to it. It's time to build our own. So that's how I see.
Okay, thank you for that. Tina, I'm gonna ask you 2 separate questions because it's gonna lead into a question I'm gonna ask Evelyn. First question is, how did you balance being a mom with building a nonprofit organization? So, you know, part of the reason you built Mother Coders was because the restrictions that came with, you know, trying to jump back into the job market. So instead you built a company or an organization, which still requires, you know, a really high level of attention and balance. You know, how did you navigate that?
Well, I mean, being a first gen kid, you get scrappy. Everyone around you had like 2 or 3 jobs, right? So for me, I actually never stepped out of the workforce. My journey was, you know, being a Mills woman. I came in with a very liberal artsy general, and even my major was political, legal, and economic analysis. What the hell is that, right? The reason why I chose that is because I knew I wanted to affect change. And it seemed like all the things that were pissing me off led back to money. So let's follow the money and figure out how this works, right? I mean, capitalism's gonna cap. So let's just figure out like how you attach yourself to the problem and try to figure that out. So I started my career in management consulting, you know, being in corporate, really decided to do the whole do-gooder thing because I got politically activated and I did not see people from my community inside these rooms where they were, you know, making plans to how to cut up the pig, right? And for me, that long journey brought me back to economics, or job and workforce development, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You got to have your base needs met before you can start thinking about higher level things like civic and political engagement and self-actualization. So for me, helping folks figure out how to get a job, but also connect their passion and their gift to that was really important. And being a student of human-centered design, I see things as like super complicated. You have to design for the people specifically. And I started with moms because I was a mom, and all the coding classes that were popping up, the free ones, online or in person, they were at night or self-guided. They were just inaccessible to you if you had caregiving responsibilities, and not just moms, right? There are people caring for their parents or family members. So for me, when I started Mother Coders, it was really about activating women who already had college degrees, who already had work experience, something that the tech industry was saying was a prerequisite. And I'm like, you need people? I got people. They just need the tech layer. So that's how I decided to solve that. But now that I'm at Bitwise, we are building our own table. So Bitwise started as a tech training company, and then they realized the tech industry, the big companies weren't hiring the graduates at a rate that the community was satisfied with, right? It just wasn't sustainable in the long run. They said, we're going to build our own tech consulting company. And then they added, hey, we're going to have our own co-working space and bring in mission-aligned partners and startups. So I love their ecosystem approach, and I want to amplify what Tiffany is saying. Like, you have to think at a systems level. You got to bring people together because you don't know what someone else knows, right? And I think long-term, because we have this opportunity right now to reimagine all things, because we realize everything burned down and everything basically doesn't work anymore, there's like a crack in the universe, there's some light coming through, and we gotta take a crowbar to it and just get our people in right now.
Yeah. So the second question, and this was an interesting a bit I read, you used this term called algorithmic bias. Can you explain what that is and how it works?
So just like how we started the conversation with how you define digital divide, regular people building software are deciding how to define things. And how you define things is based on how you see the world. And how you see the world is dependent on how you grew up in your environment, right? And because marginalized communities don't currently have access to those jobs or that type of education and training, the people that are building all the technology right now are missing those perspectives. So when you go in, let's say, for example, very relevant example of different states going about who gets access to the vaccines first, right? Some states were like, let's get everyone in as soon as possible. It doesn't matter who you are, let's just get them in. And then I live in California, we decided we were going to go by tiers, like, okay, first the 65 and over, then, people with pre-existing. So we had a tiered system that had an equity lens to it. And you see the different outcomes. Well, what happened was those definitions caused a lot of confusion because now you have people lying, you have people very confused about whether or not they apply, right? And worse, because marginalized communities don't have access to information in that way, they didn't know how to go online and set up for unemployment, even if they knew they were eligible. They didn't know where to go and who to talk to. I, with all these fancy degrees I'm still paying off for, was so confused by these appointment systems where that showed you, yes, this is open, and you go to click it and it's no longer available. So the problem, with figuring out how these systems work really requires us to work collectively and work together because everyone knows something that someone else doesn't.
Thank you for that. And so, Evelyn, this leads me to you. What is tech activism?
Yeah, so I kind of also wanted just to add on to the algorithm bias, and I know we're running quickly out of time, but an algorithm is just a set of rules of how to problem solve. And when you're looking at the web, you have so much content. Like, how do you pull that content out? So a lot of people just tag different content. So for example, if you're trying to look at what does a bias look like on the web, you could go to Google, you could search beautiful women. That is not representative of people in my family, in my community, of all around the world. Like, what comes up? That's a bias. When we're talking about even Black Girls Code and why Black Girls Code was so important and so revolutionary when we came out, where diversity wasn't even being talked about in Silicon Valley, is when you put in a Google search Black girls, the horrendous things that will pop up that people put on the web. And when Black Girls Code became known, when young girls typed in Black girls, often the number one or the number two word that formulated was code. And it completely is changing the narrative, it's changing how you view yourself, and it's changing things. And that's, just talking briefly about algorithm bias. So bringing it back also to the first question you asked, Tina, and just bringing it to techactivist.org, even if we change Google in Silicon Valley to have all recruiting to be Black and brown, like women, people from the hood, all this, like, it's not really going to change the issue of Silicon Valley, because as Tina alluded, capitalism is like a thing. And how tech is really aligned, it's very extractive and very exploitative. So as Adriana also mentioned, you have this whole gig economy that the tech boom has kind of like pushed out. And right now, what's really important that all of us that we're talking about social profit organizations and digital divide is talking about what's happening in Amazon and union of workers, protecting workers, and how that is needed to do across all industries. How do we protect our workers? Because when people think about, I want to break into tech, why do you want to break into tech? Because there's opportunities, and there's opportunities with vast wealth, with vast money. And people know we don't have those resources there. So we want to break into tech to share some of these resources, to bring it back to our hood, our communities. And I feel as though that's what techactivist.org represents. It's having a class analysis understanding what is happening in the world, not just in the US lens, because if you're talking even about like building a pipeline, a lot of these pipelines that corporations create, they're like pooling the geniuses from our Black and brown communities, pulling them up to these apprenticeship programs and not even paying them what they're worth. So it's very hurtful, because then you leave behind our communities that's already being gentrified and all of that. If you think, even when you're thinking, you know, I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban, Black Puerto Rican, and when you're thinking about islands, a lot of the islands back in the day before customer service went to India happened. Call centers happen in the islands. And when you're thinking about, you know, tech is still at a place where it's trying to, it doesn't want to pay everyone $200,000 to be a software engineer. So a lot of those jobs are already, people are already trying to figure out how to automate coding, how to automate all these things. So I feel oftentimes it's like by the time our people gets to the room or hears what's on the menu at the table, a lot of things are already, you know, they're gone. So it's up to us to organize and have the language to know I'm breaking into tech or I'm learning computer programming, not just to benefit myself, but having a community aspect, a mindfulness, and, you know, I'm going to learn how to code so I can create tools for my community that aren't, you know, leaning into the surveillance capitalistic model and really uplifts data privacy. I'm learning or breaking into tech so I can create like a fund with all of the other tech entrepreneurs who are making 200,000, so then we can fund projects that are important to us. I'm breaking into tech knowing that, you know, as a woman in December, all of the jobs that were lost were women. When you're thinking in December alone, 154,000 Black women left the job market. That's problems. So it's just like understanding and having all this background information. So when I go, I'm not trying to get a seat at a privileged table. That is not what my ancestors called me to do. I'm going very mindful with an agenda, and my agenda, it's my people. It's to serve my people and understand how to, I not just make the workforce, you know, have workforce diversity, but look at all the vendors, look at all the policies in this company. How can we make sure everything's accessible to everybody in different communities? Techactivist.org leans on the 10th point of the 10-point program, Black Panther program, where it says community control of modern technology. I think it's really interesting, you know, when you think of the Black Panther Party, a lot of people just think afros, guns, leather jackets, and a fist up. They had 67 community programs. When Tina's talking about like your needs and having your needs met so that you can think, so you can organize, that's what the Black Panther Party did. They tried to meet your needs. So it's not charity. We're going to give you some food, but we're also going to give you this book. So when you're eating, you're thinking. And on their 10th point, community control of modern technology, in 1968, in 1972, the Black Panther Party said there was a tech issue. You know, we're now so many years later, and our ancestors did talk about it being a tech issue. What happens if, you know, the class that's just wants to exploit has all the tools of technology? What would happen to us? And they're talking about, like, you know, open source communities and the power of us controlling this tech. Because tech, you know, it's not bad. It's like a hammer. You could build a house or you could destroy a house. If we have drones dropping bombs, drones should be made dropping food deliveries. We in the United States, and during this time, we create more food to feed the entire population twice. But yet, most of our population, human population, you know, they're dying of hunger. We're trying to go to the moon and people are still dying of hunger here on Earth. So it's just like not just having that tech skills, but having humanity.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We are closing on time. I do want to leave the time for audience questions. And I had two big questions that I sent to everyone, and you pretty much answered it. One had to do with, how do we deal with the tech companies and the platforms, the social media platforms? Are we asking the tiger to change its stripes, or do we force the tiger to evolve into something else that's not a tiger? And so I feel like that question was answered. And then the other question was, really reimagining a future outside the current concepts and constructs and constraints of whiteness. What you thought about what that reimagined future would look like, and speaking it into existence. And what I'm hearing is like, we need our own table. We need our own platforms. We can't rely on current structures and burn it to the ground and build something new. We have 4 minutes left. I would like to get at least one audience question in. So if someone has a question, please go ahead and type it. I'll take the first question that came in. Alfredo Gonzalez says, what about minerals like lithium for tech? Does innovation have to be tech? Yeah, anyone who wants to take that one.
I mean, it doesn't have to be like actual software. I think just even looking at our phone and understanding how our phone is created, when you're taking out the pieces, a lot of pieces are coming from the Congo. The Congo is one of the most richest in resources place in the entire universe, and is dealing with extreme poverty. And those resources are being extracted, and being extracted for the iPhone and other screens that we use day to day. But again, that money does not go back to the community it's being extracted from. So I think, there's so many layers and levels.
Thank you for that.
Technology is a tool, right? Different tools for different problems. Someone asked me the other day what my favorite invention of all time of humanity, right? Just all time. And the best thing I could come up with is stories. Stories have always been here for us. They're the thing that humans use to help us make sense of the world. So let's tell a new story about technology and who gets to be included, who gets to make it, who consumes it, and how.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in too. I believe that my future, or anyone's future, should look like them making a difference, knowing that they can make a difference, knowing that they can be involved, knowing that they will be successful. I think the fact that there are a lot more people who are not from the Silicon Valley are having those opportunities, and less of the people who are from here having those opportunities, is a big problem. So when giving back to your community, that should be part of the norm. Letting the people who already are from here have the opportunity to learn, and that be a priority. That should be a priority, and not just at the moment, but for your future moving forward. That should be the normal.
Thank you.
Yeah. And going back to your questions about the future and how do we build outside of the context of whiteness, I think it goes back to self-determination, being able to define ourselves for ourselves, and really taking that in. Even sometimes when we talk about discussions around diversity in tech, it's always in opposition to who's there, in opposition to what's whiteness and what's there. I'm looking forward to being able to say we exist without being in opposition to anything else. How we get there, I think, again, it's continuing to have these conversations. Investing in our young people, investing in our communities to define ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you all. This was an extremely great conversation. I was actually pretty nervous about talking to y'all because this is like Carrie said, the caliber in the room, you got to be ready. So I really appreciate all of you taking time to serve on this panel and have this conversation. I would like to thank Andre, Adriana Campbell, Edeline Bobby, Tina Lee, and Tiffany Schumacher. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.